Hello, my name is Jo Mauskopf, and I've been at TFAD for over 3 years now. And one of the things that I do is find readers for the Forest Readers every Tuesday at 4 p.m. These people read things that they or family members have written, or things that they have enjoyed reading. I want to take a few moments today to thank all the people who have been Forest Readers. I want to thank especially the 16 people who have read since the COVID-19 lockdown began at TFAD. Our processes for the reading changed with no live audience and various recording methods tested, not all of which were successful. So I'm especially grateful to them for their patience and understanding. I also want to thank Kelsey and Megan and Sandy and Glenn, TFAD staff, for their wonderful support and patience. New readers out there are always welcome. Please let me know if you have something you would like to read. Today, we are testing a new, improved, we hope, sound system, which we hope will improve the sound going forward, both on TV 1390, as well as in person once we are able to resume these sessions. For my reading today, I have chosen to read some nonsense poems by Lewis Carroll and Edward Lear. The past 6 months have felt very strange, and so the fantasy world in these poems does not seem so far away from the reality in which we are living. I hope that they enrich your COVID-19 world. The first poem is by Lewis Carroll and described how he came to write the Alice in Wonderland book, encouraged by 3 small girls, daughters of a friend of his, while on a boating excursion down the Thames River. All in the golden afternoon. All in the golden afternoon, full leisurely we glide, for both our oars with little skill by little arms are plied, while little hands make vain pretense our wanderings to guide. Our cruel 3, in such an hour, beneath such dreamy weather, to beg a tale of breath too weak to stir the tiniest feather. Yet what can one poor voice avail against 3 tongues together? Imperious Prima flashes forth her edict to begin it. In gentler tones, Secunda hopes there will be nonsense in it, while Tertia interrupts the tale not more than once a minute. Anon to sudden silence won, in fancy they pursue the dream child moving through a land of wonders wild and new, in friendly chat with bird or beast, and half believe it true. And ever as the story drained the wells of fancy dry, and faintly strove that weary one to put the subject by, till next time. It is next time, the happy voices cry. Thus grew the tale of Wonderland. Thus slowly, one by one, its quaint events were hammered out, and now the tale is done. And home we steer, a merry crew, beneath the setting sun. Alice, a childish story take, and with a gentle hand, lay it where childhood's dreams are twined, in memory's mystic band. Like pilgrims withered wreaths of flowers, plucked in a far-off land. Now this next one, The Walrus and the Carpenter, is from Alice Through the Looking Glass. The sun, and is for all of you who've missed going to the beach this summer. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If it were only cleared away, they said it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the Walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come and walk with us, the Walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk, along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. And thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the Walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the Carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the Walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar beside are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the Walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The Carpenter said nothing, but cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the Walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The Carpenter said nothing, but the butter's spread too thick. I weep for you, the Walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears, he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oh, oysters, said the Carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again? But answer there came none, and this was scarcely odd, because they'd eaten every one. Okay. The next one is The Mad Gardener's Song, and this is from a different book by Lewis Carroll called Sylvie and Bruno, less well-known book. He thought he saw an elephant that practiced on a fife. He looked again and found it was a letter from his wife. At length I realize, he said, the bitterness of life. He thought he saw a buffalo upon the chimney piece. He looked again and found it was his sister's husband's niece. Unless you leave this house, he said, I'll send for the police. He thought he saw a rattlesnake that questioned him in Greek. He looked again and found it was the middle of next week. The one thing I regret, he said, is that it cannot speak. He thought he saw a banker's clerk descending from the bus. looked again and found it was a hippopotamus. "If this should stay to dine," he said, "there won't be much for us." He thought he saw a kangaroo that worked a coffee mill. He looked again and found it was a vegetable pill. "Were I to swallow this," he said, "I should be very ill." He thought he saw a coach and four that stood beside his bed. He looked again and found it was a bear without a head. "Poor thing," he said, "poor silly thing, it's waiting to be fed." He thought he saw an albatross that fluttered round the lamp. He looked again and found it was a penny postage stamp. "You best be getting home again," he said, "the nights are very damp." He thought he saw a garden door that opened with a key. He looked again and found it was a double rule of 3. "And all its mystery," he said, "is clear as day to me." He thought he saw an argument that proved he was the Pope. He looked again and found it was a bar of mottled soap. A fact so dread, he faintly said, extinguishes all hope. And now another poem from Alice Through the Looking Glass, Jabberwocky. "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. Took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the Manx's own foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, calloo, callay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Here's another one from Alice in Wonderland this time. "You are old, Father William." "You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right?" "In my youth," Father William replied to his son, "I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again." "You are old," said the youth, "as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that?" "In my youth," said the sage, as he shook his grey locks, "I kept all my limbs very supple by the use of this ointment, 1 shilling the box. Allow me to sell you a couple." "You are old," said the youth, "and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than suet. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it?" "In my youth," said his father, "I took to the law and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life." "You are old," said the youth. "One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever, yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever?" "I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough," said his father. "Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs." This is another one from Through the Looking Glass. An aged, aged man. I'll tell thee everything I can. There's little to relate. I saw an aged, aged man a-sitting on a gate. Who are you, aged man, I said, and how is it you live? And his answer trickled through my head like water through a sieve. He said, I look for butterflies that sleep among the wheat. I make them into mutton pies and sell them in the street. I sell them unto men, he said, who sail on stormy seas, and that's the way I get my bread, a trifle, if you please. But I was thinking of a plan to dye one's whiskers green and always use so large a fan that they could not be seen. So having no reply to give to what the old man said, I cried, come, tell me how you live, and thumped him on the head. His accent smile took up the tale. He said, I go my ways, and when I found a mountain rill, I set it in a blaze, and thence they make a stuff they call Rowland's Massacassa oil, yet twopence halfpenny is all they give me for my toil. But I was thinking of a way to feed oneself on batter, and so go on from day to day, getting a little fatter. I shook him well from side to side until his face was blue. Come tell me how you live, I cried, and what it is you do. He said, I hunt for haddocks' eyes among the heather bright, and work them into waistcoat buttons in the silent night. And these I do not sell for gold, or coin of silvery shine, but for a copper halfpenny, and that will purchase 9. I sometimes dig for buttered rolls, or set lime twigs for crabs. I sometimes search the grassy knolls for wheels of hansom cabs. And that's the way, he gave a wink, by which I get my wealth, and very gladly will I drink your honour's noble health. I heard him then, for I had just completed my design to keep the Menai Bridge from rust by boiling it in wine. I thanked him much for telling me the way he got his wealth, but chiefly for his wish that he might drink my noble health. And now, if e'er by chance I put my fingers into glue, or madly squeeze a right-hand foot into a left-hand shoe, or if I drop upon my toe a very heavy weight, I weep, for it reminds me so of that old man I used to know, whose look was mild, whose speech was slow, whose hair was whiter than the snow, whose face was very like a crow, with eyes like cinders all aglow, who seemed distracted with his woe, who rocked his body to and fro, and muttered mumblingly and low, as if his mouth were full of dough, who snorted like a buffalo that summer evening long ago, a-sitting on a gate. This last one of Lewis Carroll from Alice in Wonderland again. 'Tis the voice of the lobster. 'Tis the voice of the lobster, I heard him declare. You have baked me too brown, I must sugar my hair. As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound. I passed by his garden and marked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing a pie. The panther took pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl got the dish as his share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl and concluded the banquet by eating the owl. So now I'm going to switch over to a couple of poems by Edward Lear, who's another nonsense poetry writer. This one, I'm sure you all know, The Owl and the Pussycat. The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar, "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are, you are, you are. What a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows, and there in a wood a piggy-wig stood, with a ring at the end of his nose, his nose, his nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" said the piggy. "I will." So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon, and hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon, the moon, the moon. They danced by the light of the moon. Now, Edward Lear wrote a lot of limericks, but I'm only going to read you 2 of them, but you can find them on the internet. There was an old person of Fife who was greatly disgusted with life. They sang him a ballad and fed him on salad, which cured that old person of Fife. There was an old man in a tree who was horribly bored by a bee. When they said, "Does it buzz?" he replied, "Yes, it does. It's a regular brute of a bee." Okay, so one more by Edward Lear, The Courtship of the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. On the coast of Coromandel, where the early pumpkins blow, in the middle of the woods lived the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. 2 old chairs and half a candle, 1 old jug without a handle. These were all his worldly goods in the middle of the woods. These were all the worldly goods of the Yonghy Bonghy Beau, of the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. Once among the bong trees walking, where the early pumpkins blow, to a little heap of stones came the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. There he heard a lady talking to some milk-white hens of Dorking. "'Tis the Lady Jingly Jones on that little heap of stones. Sits the Lady Jingly Jones," said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau, said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. Lady Jingly, sitting where the pumpkins blow, "Will you come and be my wife?" said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. "I am tired of living singly on this coast so wild and shingly. I am weary of my life. If you'll come and be my wife, quite serene would be my life," said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau, said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. On this coast of Coromandel, shrimps and watercresses grow. Prawns are plentiful and cheap, said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. You shall have my chairs and candle, and my jug without a handle. Gaze upon the rolling deep. Fish is plentiful and cheap, as the sea, my love, is deep, said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau, said the Yonghy Bonghy Beau. Lady Jingly answered sadly, and her tears began to flow. Your proposal comes too late, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo. I would be your wife most gladly. Here she twirled her fingers madly. But in England I've a mate. Yes, you've asked me far too late, for in England I've a mate, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo. Mr. Jones, his name is Handel Jones, Esquire and Co. Dorking fowls delights to send, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo. Keep, oh keep your chairs and candle, and your jug without a handle. I can merely be your friend. Should my Jones more Dorking send, I will give you 3, my friend, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo. Though you've such a tiny body, and your head so large doth grow, though your hat may blow away, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo, though you're such a hoddy-doddy, yet I wish that I could modify the words I need must say. Will you please to go away? That is all I have to say, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo, Mr. Yongy Bongy Bo. Down the slippery slopes of myrtle, where the early pumpkins blow, to the calm and silent sea fled the Yongy Bongy Bo. There, beyond the bay of Gurtle, lay a large and lively turtle. You're the cove, he said, for me. On your back, beyond the sea, turtle, you shall carry me, said the Yongy Bongy Bo, said the Yongy Bongy Bo. Through the silent roaring ocean did the turtle swiftly go. Holding fast upon his shell rode the Yongy Bongy Bo. With a sad primeval motion towards the sunset isles of Boshen, still the turtle bore him well. Holding fast upon his shell, Lady Jingly Jones, farewell, sang the Yongy Bongy Bo, sang the Yongy Bongy Bo. From the coast of Coromandel did that lady never go. On that heap of stones she mourns for the Yongy Bongy Bo. On that coast of Coromandel, in his jug without a handle, still she weeps and daily moans on that little heap of stones. To her Dorking hen she moans for the Yongy Bongy Bo, for the Yongy Bongy Bo. Okay, so that's all the nonsense that I have today. I'm going to finish with just another poem that's one of my favorites, but isn't nonsense and just has a beautiful message, I think. It's called Abu Ben Adam. Abu Ben Adam, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace and saw within the moonlight in his room, making it rich and like a lily in bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold. Exceeding peace had made Ben Adam bold, and to the presence in the room he said, "What writest thou?" The vision raised his head, and with a look made of all sweet accord, answered, "The names of those who love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abu. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abu spoke more low, but cheerily still, and said, "I pray thee then, write me as one that loves his fellow men." The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great wakening light, and showed the names whom love of God had blessed. And lo, Ben Adam's name led all the rest. So that's all I'm going to read today. And once coming up, and anyone who hasn't read before but would like to, please contact me. Kelsey Megan can tell you how to get in touch with me. My name's in the book. But thank you for listening today.